For years, Simon Cowell was the judge nobody wanted to face. Blunt, sharp-tongued, seemingly immune to sentiment, he built a global media empire on the strength of two words, no and next. Then, gradually, something in him visibly softened. The man who once shut down dreams without blinking started tearing up on camera. He talked more about home than about ratings. And when clips of that softer Simon started circulating online, the internet did what it always does with an unexplained change in a famous person. It invented a story. Specifically, it invented a story about his young son, Eric, suggesting he was quietly battling a serious, undisclosed illness. That story spread fast, fueled by dramatic thumbnails and sad music, and it has never been backed by anything resembling a confirmed source. No family statement. No medical announcement. Nothing beyond speculation dressed up as fact. So if that isn't what changed Simon Cowell, what actually did? The real answer, it turns out, is better documented, considerably less speculative, and honestly more compelling than the rumor ever was. To understand how significant Cowell's later softening actually looks, it helps to remember exactly what the earlier version of him was known for. Cowell built his reputation across 3 decades and multiple continents, first as a music industry executive shepherding pop acts through the UK charts, then as the breakout judge on Pop Idol and later American Idol, and eventually as the creator and driving force behind both the X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, along with their American counterpart, America's Got Talent. His on-camera persona was defined by an almost total absence of sentimentality. He interrupted performances mid-song. He told contestants on camera that they had no future in the industry, often within seconds of them finishing. Audiences tuned in partly for the discoveries and partly, unmistakably, for the bluntness itself. It became his brand as much as any artist he ever signed. For the better part of 2 decades, that persona barely wavered. Which is exactly why the shift, when it eventually came, was so noticeable to longtime viewers. Before getting to what's true, it's worth being clear about what isn't. There has been no confirmed report, from Cowell, from Lauren Silverman, or from any credible outlet, of a serious health diagnosis involving Eric Cowell. Public appearances of Eric in recent years, including alongside his father in interviews and in Cowell's 2025 Netflix docuseries, Simon Cowell, The Next Act, show an active, engaged child living an ordinary life, as much as any child of a famous parent can. The specific viral claims that circulated online trace back to unsourced social posts and video thumbnails rather than to any statement from the family or a legitimate news outlet, and they follow a familiar internet pattern. Take a public figure's visible emotional shift, attach it to the most dramatic possible explanation involving their child, and let the algorithm do the rest. It's a genre of content that spreads specifically because it's emotionally potent, not because it's accurate. That doesn't mean nothing changed in Simon Cowell, though. Something clearly did. The real story is just made of different material than the rumor: a serious accident, a documented health scare, years of quiet lifestyle overhaul, and one particular on-stage moment involving a teenage dancer that had nothing to do with his son at all, but everything to do with why Cowell's public persona started to crack open. On August 8, 2020, Cowell was testing a new electric bike in the courtyard of his home in Malibu, California, with his family nearby, when he lost control and fell. He broke his back. The injury was serious enough that doctors performing his subsequent surgery found he had come close to a catastrophic outcome. When I saw the X-ray, I really nearly smashed my spine to pieces, so I literally wouldn't have been able to walk, Cowell later told Extra. He underwent a lengthy operation, reported at between 5 and 6 hours, to insert a metal rod and screws stabilizing his spine, and the recovery that followed took months. Cowell has said the first weeks were the hardest of his life, describing a level of physical helplessness he had never experienced before. He was unable to appear on that season of Britain's Got Talent as a result, temporarily replaced on the judging panel by former winner Ashley Banjo. Cowell has since spoken candidly about how much worse the injury actually was than it appeared publicly at the time. "I didn't talk about it too much at the time," he told OK Magazine. "I kept a lot back. It was a lot worse than people thought. I had a lot of long-term nerve damage as well." He's also described the accident, in hindsight, as something that arrived for a reason, forcing him to confront just how unfit and unwell he had let himself become in the years leading up to it. The recovery process pushed him into daily walking regimens, sometimes covering 5 to 10 miles a day simply to rebuild strength, and he said repeatedly since that he ultimately came out the other side of the accident healthier than he went in, a rare, genuinely earned silver lining to a genuinely frightening injury. It wasn't his only bike accident either. In February 2022, he broke his arm in a second e-bike incident in London, though that injury didn't require surgery. Even that setback didn't discourage him from getting back on two wheels. "I'm still gonna stay on my bike," he told reporters afterward. "I'm obsessed with these things." He's also described lingering effects that persisted well after the bones themselves had healed, recalling one outing to a fun fair with Eric where he tried to kick a football and found the resulting pain still, months later, genuinely agonizing, a small but telling detail about how long the physical consequences of that single fall actually lasted. The 2020 back injury wasn't actually the first wake-up call. 3 years earlier, in October 2017, Cowell fainted and fell down a staircase at his London home in the middle of the night, an episode later attributed to low blood pressure. He's described the fall as a genuine shock, a reminder that he wasn't invincible, arriving at a moment when he already had, in his words, more responsibility than ever as a father. Within about a day of that scare, according to his own account, he overhauled his diet entirely, cutting out red meat, dairy, sugar, bread, wheat, and gluten, and moving toward a largely plant-based way of eating. The change wasn't cosmetic. He said publicly that he lost around 20 pounds in the months that followed and repeatedly credited the shift with improving his memory, his energy, and his ability to physically keep up with a young, high-energy child. That connection to Eric runs through nearly every interview Cowell has given about his health since. He's joked more than once about effectively adopting what he calls the Eric diet, pointing out, with visible amusement, that his son's natural preferences for water and raw vegetables ended up shaping his own eating habits more than any nutritionist did. When he regained some of the weight he'd lost during his lengthy recovery from the 2020 back injury, those close to him, including his longtime friend, singer Sunita Malone, described Eric as the driving force that pushed him to get back on track. He was looking at Eric and thinking, "I've got to get through this somehow," Sunita told The Sun at the time. Cowell himself has been direct about the stakes. "If Eric hadn't come along, God knows what would have happened," he said. "I was really unhappy. But now Eric is around, I don't work through the night anymore." If there's a single documented moment that best explains the emotional shift people noticed in Simon Cowell on screen, it isn't connected to his own family at all. It's connected to a teenage dancer named Julia Carlyle. In 2017, Carlyle appeared on Britain's Got Talent with her dance troupe, then performing under the name Just Us and later known as Mirza Girls. During their audition, 15-year-old Carlyle revealed she had scoliosis, a curvature of the spine so severe that, left untreated through the standard NHS surgical option, it would have fused her spine with metal rods and ended her ability to dance permanently. The group's performance, built around Carlyle's own story, earned them a golden buzzer from Judge Alicia Dixon, sending them straight through to the semi-finals. The troupe publicly promised that if they won the show's £250,000 top prize, they'd use it to fund an alternative, less restrictive surgery for Carlyle available only in the United States, at a cost of roughly £175,000. They didn't win. They finished 9th. But backstage, away from the cameras, Cowell approached Carlyle and told her he would personally cover the full cost of the operation himself. "He didn't have to do it and he has changed my life," Carlyle said afterward. "There are no words to thank him for how grateful we are." Carlyle underwent 2 rounds of surgery in the United States in 2017, a procedure using screws and a flexible cord rather than rigid rods, preserving her ability to move and dance. The curve in her spine, previously measured at more than 100 degrees, was corrected to around 50. She described the recovery as painful but transformative. In the weeks immediately afterward, she said she was still in significant pain even sitting on a sofa, before gradually regaining movement over the following months. Cowell reportedly kept up with her progress personally throughout, checking in as she healed rather than treating the donation as a one-time gesture. By early 2018, Carlisle said the curve in her spine had halved and that she was dancing again, performing with Mirza girls at events across the UK. Her story also caught the attention of Princess Eugenie, who had dealt with scoliosis herself as a teenager. The princess wrote to Carlisle and her troupe and later invited them to her royal wedding, where the group choreographed a dance as a thank you gift. The moment that arguably matters most for understanding Cowell's public transformation came in 2019, when Julia Carlisle, then 17, returned to the Britain's Got Talent stage for the first time since her surgery, and performed a backflip. Cowell, known for decades as the show's hardest judge to move, was visibly overcome. Witnesses described him as barely able to speak, wiping away tears in front of a live audience at Wembley Arena. "I thought that now I would be at home not dancing for the rest of my life," Carlisle told the crowd, "but here I am backflipping with my best friends. I couldn't walk 2 years ago and now I am here. Simon, thank you so much." It's a moment that's easy to see, in hindsight, as a genuine turning point in how Cowell allowed himself to be seen on camera, not performing emotion for a talent show narrative, but visibly, unmistakably moved by watching a young person he'd personally helped overcome something life-altering. Running underneath all of this is the plainer, better documented story of Cowell's own fatherhood. He and his partner, Lauren Silverman, welcomed their son Eric on February 14, 2014, naming him after Cowell's own late father. Cowell has spoken often and openly about how disorienting and transformative the experience of becoming a parent in his 50s turned out to be, especially arriving as it did not long after he'd lost both of his own parents, his father in 1999, his mother in 2015. "After I lost my parents, I genuinely felt," he told People in 2025, trailing into a description of the depth of love he found instead in raising his son. "I love every second I spend with him." He's been equally candid about what his life looked like before Eric arrived. "Before Eric, my life was 99% work. I was obsessed with it," he said. In earlier years, that obsession showed up in punishing, well-documented work habits, marathon hours reviewing tapes, auditions, and ratings data late into the night, a routine that colleagues and Cowell himself have described as unsustainable over the long run. Fatherhood didn't erase his ambition or his work ethic, but it visibly redirected where his time and attention went. He's spoken about wanting Eric to eventually understand the business he built, even suggesting in a 2018 interview that he'd like his son to start at the bottom the way he once did, learning the industry from the ground up rather than being handed anything. "I actually think he's probably the best incentive I've ever had to keep everything running as well as I possibly can over the next few years," he told Extra at the time. But he's also been clear that watching Eric grow has given him something his career alone never could, a genuine, uncomplicated reason to be present rather than constantly working. That theme has only deepened as Eric has gotten older. In interviews from 2022 onward, Cowell has talked about needing to physically get in shape just to keep up with his son on the football pitch, joking about the gap between his own energy levels in his 60s and a young boy's boundless supply of it. He's described himself in blunt terms as a different person than he was a decade earlier. "I'm a very different man to the one I was 10 years ago, thank God," he said. That kind of self-assessment, offered without prompting and repeated across multiple interviews over several years, tracks far more closely with the ordinary, gradual reordering of priorities that comes with raising a child than with a single hidden crisis kept carefully out of public view. Put together, the real, documented version of Simon Cowell's transformation doesn't need a secret family health crisis